Buckstop Junction, enhancing visitor accessibility and experience. Three interns worked at Buckstop Junction over the summer of 2020. I am Lauren Hinckley.
I am Kayla Adamick.
And I am Emily Savageau. Buckstop Junction is located in Bismarck, North Dakota, and is a historical society compiled of authentic buildings that have originated from both North Dakota and Minnesota. There were several goals of the summer interns this year, and the first goal was to create a self-guided tour for visitors of Buckstop. So self-guided tours were intended to make it easier and more informative for guests when visiting Buckstop. In the past, the only way to access extensive information about Buckstop's buildings was to go on a guided tour of the property. These tours took about an hour minimum, and so creating a self-guided tour allows visitors to walk the grounds at their own pace and allows Buckstop to function with limited staff.
Our second goal of our project was to create navigational signage and informative labels to help aid the self-guided tour by providing navigational signs to visitors and allowing information to be disseminated to the visitors more easily.
Another goal was to create a native plant exhibition, as there are very few native plant walks and gardens in the city of Bismarck, North Dakota. We wanted to make learning about native North Dakota plants more accessible to the community. Some of the outcomes that were done at Buckstop Junction for the summer of 2020 was the execution of the native plant exhibition. 15 species were sourced, planted, and labeled around the property. The plants were then put into a brochure with a small summation of how the plants were used as herbal remedies by Native Americans.
So for the self-guided tours, when creating the tours, we drew a lot of inspiration by looking at tours from other historical sites such as Fort Lincoln and Bonanzaville. How the document itself was made using Adobe Photoshop in order to create the site map. The information about each building was collected via verbal communication with Buckstop staff. Over the summer, I joined Larry, who is one of Buckstop's members, on tours and eventually got to give tours of the grounds myself. I then compiled the information that I had used in the guided tours to make a shorter synopsis of each building for the self-guided tour.
Next, building signage and labels were created for 6 buildings of Buckstop, with the potential for more to be added in the future. Outdoor conditions and space considerations were particular challenges. Research of sign companies and outdoor grade signage materials was conducted and helped to make the final decision of what signs and labels would look like. Labels were printed on linen cardstock and placed in acrylic holders to withstand the outdoor elements. And aluminum signage was ordered from a local Bismarck company that was then placed on the buildings.
So this is the front side of the self-guided tour. As you can see on the left side, we have a map of the grounds. Each building is represented by one of the dark gray squares, and the buildings are each labeled with their appropriate names. We have also added names to the streets of the historic town. If you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a compass to make navigation easier, and the flowers located across the grounds represent a plot for the native plant exhibit. On the right-hand side, we have added Buckstop's address and phone number for contact information. And we also compiled a list of rules as well as a short synopsis that was written by Buckstop staff. The backside of the map has a short synopsis of each building, and the information includes things like when the building was created, when it was moved to Buckstop, where it was originated, as well as other fun facts about the buildings.
The second goal of our project was to create signage and labels for the buildings of Buckstop to aid visitors in navigating the site and to be a primary means of conveying information. Due to the budget constraints, 6 buildings were chosen to receive signage and labels first, with the potential that more signs and labels could be added in the future to the remainder of the buildings. These buildings included a schoolhouse, Bismarck's first grocery store, and a hotel built in 1914. The 6 buildings were chosen because they were places that were frequently visited, had a long or particularly interesting history that was told on volunteer guided tours, or had no previous signage that would be able to tell the building's history. In determining what the signage and labels would look like, there was the central question of what does the organization want? Buckstop particularly wanted to maintain the rustic aesthetic and not become too touristy, for lack of a better descriptor. They also wanted anything we created to be easy to navigate around and out of the way, as the staff is all volunteers and outdoor maintenance of the site is difficult. The signs would aid in navigation, provide more detailed information about exhibits and buildings that was available on the back of the map, all while allowing a succinct version of historical information that would be explained on a longer guided tour. The labels were printed on linen cardstock paper and placed in acrylic holders, which could withstand the harsh conditions of being inside of a building that is left to the elements year-round. In addition, larger signage was ordered to place on the exterior of the buildings to draw visitors in. In this phase of the project, the question of preserving the buildings came to the forefront. How do we preserve the building while drilling a sign to it? The fact was that the buildings were already exposed to the elements, as is the nature of a historical outdoor organization. So the signs themselves wouldn't inflict any more damage structurally than the North Dakota elements. A separate sign off the building also wasn't feasible in this case because the organization really wanted something out of the way from mowing and general maintenance. The signs were 30 by 18 aluminum signs ordered from a local Bismarck company, Signorama, and they contain a 3 to 5 line description of the building to draw visitors in, as well as inform visitors who perhaps don't want to go in, but want to know something about a building on the site.
The native plant exhibition consisted of various plant species that were utilized by Native American populations as herbal remedies. Some species were not able to be sourced in the Bismarck-Mandan area or even Baldwin, North Dakota, which is approximately 15 miles north of Bismarck. However, some native species to North Dakota were able to be sourced. The source plants consisted of 15 total species, 8 flowering plants and 2 bushes, along with 5 trees. Various plots were placed around the historical site. These plots were created to hold one or more species of plants. Plot locations were chosen based off of sun exposure, regular tour routes, and which buildings are most often rented out. Various plots were created to hopefully be easy to mow around without any major concerns. Plots were then soil tested to determine inorganic components within the soil and if fertilizer was needed before the plants were planted. Plots were then dug up. Blood meal was then utilized as a fertilizer. Plants were then distributed into the plots that were landscaped. Landscaping included no-dig edging or brick found around Buckstop Junction that could be used. Landscaping was very uncommon for settlers in the early 1900s, and they really had to use what was readily available to them. As the bricks were already on the property and were readily available to us, the bricks were also made near the 1900s, so we utilize them as edging. We have various plants around the property on the left side. There is a picture of the purple coneflower, which is used for relieving inflammation. The flower can also be used to heal snake bites, stings, burns, wounds, and fungal infections. On the right, we have a prickly pear cactus. Prickly pears can be used for inflammation, arthritis, joint pain, diabetes, muscle soreness, and fatigue. On the left, we have one of our trees, which is false indigo. False indigo can be used as a dye, antiseptic, and to treat respiratory illnesses. On the right, we have Joe pyeweed. Joe pyeweed can be used for bladder and kidney illnesses. It can also treat fever, soreness, and fatigue. Signs for the plants were then created in a 1.5 by 3 inch dimensions. We utilized a botanical sign company in New York. I utilized an aluminum sign with a silver matte finish along with black lettering to mitigate discoloration from the sun exposure and to reduce glare as people were looking at the signs in direct sunlight. These signs are weather resistant. This is important as some of the signs are placed in extremely hot places around the property, and the signs need to withstand all of the snow and rain. Some of the complications that went along with our plants, there were various creatures and critters on the property that live in conjunction with some of our buildings. So occasionally, some of our plants would be dug up by some of the critters on the property. And sometimes lawnmowers would also uh, aid in chicken wire malformation. So those needed to be replanted. We just want to give a thank you to some of our sponsors for supporting our project. We would like to thank Baldwin Greenery and Nursery for their gracious donation. We would also like to thank Lincoln Oaks Nursery for their donation as well. We would also like to thank the board of Buckstop Junction for allowing us to continually do research on the property and to help with various projects.
We would also like to thank our mentors, Dr. Strand and Dr. Susan Lee, who helped us tremendously in this project. So thank you to all of them, as well as the Bismarck company Signorama, who helped to design the signs for us.